Hi guys, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar. I am Chloe Tetra. I'm the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For today, we're going to look at all or nothing thinking and how it's the enemy of the good. Now, oftentimes, when I'm chatting to clients and when I'm out in the wild, I hear people say things like, "I'm a very all or nothing person. I'm all in, or I'm not doing it at all." And I think oftentimes people wear these things as a kind of suit of valor, something that's quite a virtuous way to look at life. And although there are some advantages to maybe trying on that way of thinking, you'll soon see that maybe I differ somewhat in my opinion of it. So what I'll do for today is really give a breakdown of what that all or nothing thinking is, and we're all subject to it in particular instances, be it professionally, in our relationships, in the way we view ourselves, the world, or others, and it shows up. It's one of these cognitive traps that shows up. So we'll get a bit of familiarity around what it actually is, how to understand it a little bit better, and then I'll focus in a little bit on the harmful effects of it, because there are many. Because it's not a fantastic way to navigate the world, basically. But I'll really hone in on why that is. And in the next section, we'll have a look at shifting. If there are instances that you find yourself, oh, okay, I recognize that. That sounds a little bit like me. It's always easier, I should say, to recognize it in others. And if that's your first port of call to try and see it in yourself, then it can be a fun exercise to try and recognize it in others for today without pointing it out to them, please. And how do we shift from that all or nothing thinking to a more balanced thinking? Also, I apologize if my voice goes up and down a few octaves. I have a bit of a head cold today. And then finally, I'll close up with a few practical tools on leveling up your thinking. So understanding all or nothing thinking. Black and white, this or that, ones and zeros. So all or nothing thinking, also known as black and white thinking, is a cognitive distortion, what's known as a cognitive distortion. And there are loads of them, but of course can't we just function properly? There are loads of them there, but we'll focus on this one for today. And it is a cognitive distortion, which you can see in the name itself. It's a warped lens that we view situations through, where situations are perceived in extremes, either as a total success or total failure. So it's a very, very rigid thought pattern that often ignores the subtleties, the nuances, and the complexities of actual real life situations, people, and experiences. So when people do experience that all or nothing thinking, might say things like, if I can't do this perfectly, I'm a failure. Or the one that I hear a lot is, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not even going to give it a go. If I make one mistake, all my efforts are just for nothing. I'm totally back to square one. So that mindset doesn't really leave any room for progress, for learning, for growth, and it creates an internal environment where even small setbacks are catastrophized. Now, before I go on any further, I am the prime example of someone who naturally is very black and white, all or nothing, and I have to work quite hard to catch myself in these instances so I don't sound like the world's biggest hypocrite on these talks. But for those that have a tendency towards that, it can be quite difficult to unravel it, because it's almost like, that story people tell of two fish swimming in the water, and somebody comes up and says, "How's the water?" And the fish goes, "What's water?" Because it's so ingrained in how you view things that oftentimes you don't see the forest from the woods. My nature analogy is going in all different terrains today. So from a neuroscience perspective, that all or nothing thinking is attributed to how the brain handles stress and emotional reactions, basically. It's the amygdala that we talk about in these, which is the brain's fear center. It'll play a key role in this particular cognitive distortion. When there's stress or perceived failure, that amygdala will get activated and it'll trigger a fight or flight response. So this fear-based reaction leads to quick, emotionally charged thinking. So it affects our thinking. So hence the all or nothing categorization. The brain enters a sort of survival mode, perceiving a situation as either safe or dangerous with very, very little to no in-betweens whatsoever. And at the same time, that part of our brain that I call our adult brain, that other people call the CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, at the front, it is the area of the brain responsible for complex decision making, problem solving, regulating your emotions and not seeming like a lunatic, basically. That loses some of its ability to function optimally when we're emotionally overwhelmed. So when that amygdala is overstimulated, the prefrontal cortex takes a back seat, because basically your system will read it as, oh, well, if I'm that freaked out, there must be a critical situation happening. Long-term planning, not really a priority right now. Let's figure out how to stay safe. So it takes that back seat, and it makes it very difficult to see things critically, as in positively critically, as in zooming out mode, and see situations in a balanced way. So additionally, the neuroplasticity plays a significant role in how the all or nothing thinking becomes ingrained over time. So the more a person engages with black and white thinking, the stronger those neural pathways become, and that reinforces our thought patterns, our thought habits. So the brain, in essence, becomes wired to view situations through this lens of absolutes, making it really hard to adopt a more flexible and balanced perspective. I.e., putting that in other words, if you're somebody that's grown up that way, thinking in kind of absolutes, this, that, yes, no, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm worthless, I'm amazing, these kind of dualities, these polarities, it's very, very difficult, but not impossible. I'll tell you that firsthand. It's very difficult to untrain yourself to think in those ways, because essentially the more we repeat a way of thinking, the more our brain goes, okay, this is how you want me to think. This is what we're going to do. But being able to catch yourself, to kind of take a little bit of step back, to disidentify from some of these thought patterns and saying, okay, I can see how maybe in this situation I didn't really leave room for a middle ground. It will really, really help to get you out of what's called fixed mindset. So fixed mindset will be described by psychologist Carol Dweck, who's got a brilliant book called Mindset. I have it on my shelf. Mindset. So a fixed mindset interprets failure as a personal flaw rather than this external thing. And an external thing with the caveat of you're in a learning process, which, I mean, you could apply to life in general for all things in all situations. You're in a learning process. It's normal not to get everything right all the time. So fixed mindsets will say, I didn't get something right all the time, therefore I'm a terrible person. Which, if you hear it back, it sounds like what it is. It sounds like a ridiculous jump in logic, but so many of us are fused with this way of thinking. So it sees abilities and intelligence as this static, something you have or don't have, rather than something that's developed, something that's a process, something that's fluid. Whereas growth mindset, which you've probably heard a lot of in workplace environments, growth mindset, it embraces challenges and understands that mistakes and setbacks are part of this learning process. The all or nothing thinking traps people in this fixed mindset, where any deviation from perfection feels like a personal defeat, which is a really high bar to set yourself to go to. Can you be perfect? No. Well, I mean, no, you can't. So therefore, you have failed. Not only have you failed, but through a fixed mindset, it's a personal failure. So it's not that you failed, it's that you are a failure. So really, that's the trappings of that all or nothing fixed mindset. When we understand it a little bit and are able to take that step back, as I said, we can kind of see, okay, how is this potentially not really doing me any good? I'm kind of like spoiler alerting some of this a little bit. So let's look at the harmful effects. So starting to get a bit of a picture here, and the picture looks like a rectangle that one square is white and one square is black. All or nothing thinking, while seemingly, it's protecting us, often does more harm than good. So it's protecting us from what we perceive as threats, what we perceive as, oh, am I going to feel terribly in myself? Am I going to existentially feel like a failure? I don't want to feel these things. I have to start looking for threats and opportunities. Am I good? Am I bad? Are they good? Are they bad? Am I better? Who's better? Who's more right? Who's more beautiful? Who's more intelligent? So you're constantly scanning for these dichotomies of this or that, because it's almost this gigantic picture of thinking of the world as this massive competition, this massive dangerous competition. So you'll see it, and you've probably done it, but will never admit to it. So I'll say it at the other. You've probably seen it if you're arguing with somebody, that they're incapable of seeing it has to be either I'm right or you're wrong. There's no in between. There's no I'm right in this part of it. You're right in this part of it. Maybe both of us are right in certain ways. It's like, no, I'm right, you're wrong, loggerheads. So the cognitive distortion places a huge amount of pressure on individuals to either succeed perfectly or fail completely. The worst that anyone's ever failed at anything in the face of the planet, which can have severe consequences for emotional and psychological health. One of the most immediate effects of the all or nothing thinking is increased anxiety, of course. The brain will treat situations as high stake, where any misstep can lead to perceived disaster. I used to, as I said, I'm a recovering all or nothing thinker, and I still have to catch myself. But there's almost this sensation of things being a knife edge. Right, situations are a knife edge. They're either, and it's all high stakes. Every situation can become high stake, because if you're not right, if you're wrong, or you're not just wrong, you're wrong. You're wrong as a person. Or if you make a mistake at work, you haven't just made a single mistake. You're the worst worker. You're a terrible worker. Everything is this massive, massive knife edge. So of course, bellowing anxiety comes with it. So someone who might, be trying to stick to a low carb diet might feel extreme anxiety if they have an off-plan meal, and they will think to themselves, well, that's it. That's done. I've messed that one up, and it'll lead to a cascade of stress, negative emotions, and this downward spiral that has accompanying behaviors like, breaking out the packets of biscuits, or breaking out things that, you've felt like, oh, I had to be super, super good, so I couldn't even look at those a while back. But now that I've accidentally had something with a high carbohydrate content, I now have to go absolutely ham on the biscuits. So that stress response is rooted in the brain's limbic system, particularly the amygdala that we've talked about. And as it's processing those fear and emotional responses, it's signaling that threat, which releases a stress hormone like cortisol. High levels of cortisol over time can lead to cognitive fatigue, making it even hard to think clearly and respond rationally. So you're looking here at the more kind of long terms of this kind of thinking. So chronic stress, cognitive fatigue, decision fatigue, going, oh God, everything is high stakes. I don't even know. I don't even care. That kind of thought process. And the chronic stress aspects of things then is a whole other ballgame altogether, and can impair the hippocampus, which is a region of the brain involved in memory and learning, which means that not only are we overwhelmed kind of on a near constant basis, but we're also less likely to learn, because in chronic stress situations, your brain goes, we're not learning right now, we're surviving. So it closes you off. It closes you off, and it's difficult to think in terms of long plan, in terms of compassion, like the last chat that we had, and in terms of what have I actually learned here, because it'll be so overwhelmed that it'll go, no, I can't cope with any of this, and actually I feel terrible about myself. Now, additionally, it's going to lead to decreased motivation naturally, because Your brain's really good at categorizing events into how it makes it feel. So right now, the low carb diet has been categorized in the, oh God, no, I feel terrible. Everything about this is making me feel bad, because if I even deviate ever so slightly from this incredible pressure I've placed myself under to be perfect, then I feel like the worst person in the world. And I start to think back of every time I've ever failed in my life, and I go into my downward spiral, etc. So there's a massive, massive decrease in motivation. The intense pressure to perform perfectly will result in burnout, basically, and avoidance behavior. No, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. Wherever you see yourself doing this, that's a prime red flag of like, this is an avoidant behavior. Something in your mind has tagged this with, it makes me feel bad if I don't reach a particular height. And wherever you see yourself wanting to undertake certain behavioral and lifestyle changes, but feeling that, I don't want to look at that right now, that's a very good indication that there's an amount of black and white fixed mindset thinking. And an invitation when tackling these type of things is to go, anything that's worth doing is worth doing imperfectly, which is something I would almost get tattooed on myself, but I won't. I have enough tattoos. It's basically a remedy to that thought process, that addiction to perfection. Anything that's worth doing is worth giving it your best shot. So it's going to lead to self-sabotage of, what's the point? I've already failed since I'm not Superman and like this heroic persona that's absolutely perfect. And from a neuropsychological standpoint, the decrease in motivation is closely tied to the brain's dopamine system. I remember we talk about the dopamine system as being the mechanism involved in reward and addiction. Both of those things will follow the same pathway, and they make behaviors that make you feel good be repeated. And on the inverse, they will make behaviors that make you feel bad be like, nah, we're not doing that. Because dopamine is basically the thing that helps you get from point A to point B. It's the thing that sets your mechanisms of motion, for want of a better word, into action. So all or nothing thinking will hijack the dopamine system by focusing only on extreme outcomes. And if a perfect outcome isn't achieved, the brain doesn't register any sense of reward, leaving the person feeling deflated and discouraged. And over time, the brain becomes less sensitive to small wins. Feeling good about yourself for, filling your shopping trolley with things that you're like, yeah, I hope somebody I know runs into me because my shopping trolley's looking good. And you see these things less over time, and you're more dependent on achieving this unrealistic, perfect standard for any sense of satisfaction whatsoever. And emotionally, of course, that's going to foster a very negative self-image. When failure is seen as absolute, individuals will internalize this and their setbacks as these personal flaws. And this will absolutely erode your self-esteem and can lead to feelings of worthlessness and what's the point? And I really wish I could change things in my life, but I feel absolutely powerless. And that powerless piece, experienced day in, day out over time, plays an absolute whirlwind on your internal landscape. So I'm painting a really grim picture here on purpose to basically say, I know all or nothing sounds good sometimes, but actually it can really, really, thanks, I appreciate that. It can really get in your way of achieving what you want to achieve. I appreciate that I'm very listenable, even with a head cold. So I'm painting a really grim picture to start to put down the shield of, okay, I'm brilliant because I'm one of these people that has to be perfect and has to absolutely go all in. That's just the type of person I am. I won't even bother if I can't give it my all. Now, nuance is a good thing to adopt, and you can start to see why. So when we're shifting away from this all or nothing to balanced thinking, what does that look like? So it involves cultivating cognitive flexibility, which allows us to see situations in shades of grey. So we have that rectangle of black and white as our screen that we view all things through. We're going to bring in another shade. We're going to bring however many shades, maybe 50, maybe less, of greys into things. So we're adopting a kind of middle ground, a little bit of nuance. And that cognitive flexibility, that refers to the brain's ability to adapt its thinking and switch between concepts, try this one on, try that one on. Oh, I'm not totally stuck in my own, and consider multiple aspects of a situation, which is absolutely brilliant in workplace settings, relationship settings, family settings, family settings particularly, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to try what you're saying on, and I'm gonna see how it feels, instead of just going, absolutely not, I reject it. So that skill is essential for breaking free from your rigid thought patterns that limit growth and essentially resilience. Now, I've kind of this way, that way with the word resilience. But resilience, by any other name, just basically means how you experience setback. Is it going to throw you into packet of biscuits, downward spiral, I'm worthless, I'm powerless, my life is awful? Or is it the ability to go, yeah, didn't do it my best, what can I do different next time? So one of the most effective strategies for developing cognitive flexibility is reframing. So reframing is the process of challenging that automatic extreme thought and replacing them with more balanced alternatives. For example, instead of thinking, I failed completely because I didn't meet this deadline, you can reframe it as, I missed the deadline, I can still make significant progress and learn from this experience. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that for every deadline, because you're going to find yourself in a spot of hot water there with whoever is placing those deadlines. But really lifting some of that weight of, it's not a knife edge, nothing bad is going to happen. The world's not going to suddenly start thinking that you're a nincompoop that is absolutely worthless, a terrible employee, a terrible family member, or whatever it may be. So when you reframe, it encourages the brain to engage that prefrontal cortex that previously went to sleep and let the amygdala run the show. Which is going to be really, really helpful for reflective thinking, decision-making, and emotional regulation. So that practice is going to help to weaken the neural pathways that have been built up over probably decades of that all or nothing thinking, and it's going to strengthen more adaptive patterns. Catch yourself in the act, as they say, with the hand in the cookie jar. But catch yourself if you're ever going, I am being a little bit fixed, I am being a bit rigid. Is there a little bit of room for leeway? It's very difficult, because when you're stuck in an all or nothing thinking pattern, and it's related to how you view yourself personally, and there's all these very high stakes of, I have to be right, otherwise I'm nothing. And it's extremely embarrassing to say out loud, but those are the emotional and psychological undercurrents that go with that. It's very difficult to let go of that and say, and scary, because if you feel under threat, if you feel like the very core of your being is under threat, it can be scary to let go of that, of the reins of it a little bit, and say, okay, if it weren't like this, what might it be like? And to really, really practice that self-compassion. And I always say it, and I'll say it, and I'll say it again. When we, Jesus, it's gone out of my head. It must have been a lie. Wait the now. Hang on, it'll come back. Just give me 2 seconds of dead airspace. Nope, it's gone. Another critical aspect of because I don't know where that's gone. So that self-compassion aspect of things, what was I talking about? I'm back in the room. Okay. That self-compassion aspect of things, it's really going to, there we go, it's come back. Wait, knowing the mechanisms of how certain things work actually really, really help, because you're able to go, okay, I can see how that's working myself. I can see that that's how most standard human beings are built. That's how our brains works. That's how our brains work. And it gives you a little bit of leeway and space to be able to disengage with something and say, now that I know the mechanism of it, I actually have a degree of choice come back into this. And giving yourself a bit of choice, giving yourself a little bit of self-compassion towards it. And I've done a whole spiel on self-compassion that you can see in the backlog videos, but essentially it gives you back some of that power that might have felt like it was lacking. And your day-to-day experience is going to really, really shift into something where there's a lot more safety. There's a lot more stronger communication, stronger relationship building, stronger professional links, familial links, whatever it may be. you'll be a much more pleasant person to be around once you adapt a little bit of that growth mindset a little bit more. And to finish off, I will go on practical tools, which I've kind of mentioned a little bit. So if you're really, really trying to overcome that all or nothing thinking and develop that sustainable cognitive flexibility, it's essential to adopt particular tools to help it get integrated into your daily life. Reflective journaling is fantastic, even if you are allergic. And do you know what? Specifically, if you're allergic to looking at your own thoughts, maybe you need to look at your own thoughts. Give yourself 10 minutes, 1 page on an A5 per day. That's all. And have a look at the types of thoughts that you are having that day. Reflective journaling will really, really allow you to identify moments of the all or nothing thinking and challenge them. By writing down extreme thoughts and then actively reframing them, you create a space for a more balanced perspective. Try on, what would it be like if it was the opposite? Now, I'm not saying to gaslight yourself into oblivion or anything like that. You're working with a known cognitive distortion, and you're seeing, okay, let's build a little bit more flexibility and nuance around this. When you encounter setbacks or a challenging situation, write down the all or nothing thought that came to mind, and then challenge it by asking, is this really true? What evidence do I have for it? What evidence do I have against it? Oftentimes, reality and the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's somewhere in the middle, but what you're doing while you're writing it down and you're reminding yourself of that is you're bringing down the power of that amygdala. It's not going to go into total panic, anxiety, fear, downward spiral mode. You're bringing that down, and that allows the prefrontal cortex to get back in the room with you. And you're able to go, okay, I can see how this situation may have played out. It's not important for you to solve all conversations, all situations at any given time. That's not the object of the exercise here. The object of the exercise is to make your day-to-day experience less anxious, less fixed, and less feeling like setbacks and mistakes are a reflection of your worth as an individual, because they absolutely aren't. So another tool that you can use is setting micro goals. So micro goals are small, achievable steps that contribute to larger objectives. So instead of getting overwhelmed by setting something quite large, perfectionist goals like I will become fluent in Spanish in 3 months before my holiday, break the goal down into smaller, more manageable tasks. Like I'll spend 5 minutes. I'll spend 5 minutes on it a day, every single day. If I want to spend more after that 5 minutes, happy days. But the 5 minute is my micro goal. By achieving those small micro goals consistently, you create a sense of progress, which activates that reward system that we talked about, the reward system that's responsible for motivation. So that approach will help to build confidence and reduce the pressure to perform perfectly, which will build into a momentum of rejigging your neural and cognitive pathways to let go of that black and white thinking and bring in the ability to sit in the discomfort of imperfection. Now, make sure as a final checkout, make sure that you do celebrate your progress, no matter how small. All or nothing thinkers often dismiss incremental progress altogether, focusing totally on the end goal and what they did to not get there. When you celebrate each small step forward, you're training your brain to recognize and reward small wins that strengthen neural pathways associated with positivity and motivation and just feeling better about yourself. Right, I'll cut it there because I thought I'd talk less today, but I didn't. I'm really utilizing my time. So I hope you found that helpful, and go out into the big bad world and look for evidence of all or nothing thinking. If you have any questions or any comments, I'm happy to address them and always love to hear them, particularly Purple Mongoose telling me that I'm always very listenable. So thanks, guys. Have a lovely rest of your day. And I think I'm back next week, or Andrew's back next week. I'm not too sure on that, but I'll check it out for you guys. Right. We'll see you again, and remember shades of grey, I guess. Bye now.